June 21st back in order at 7:01. The first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Not seeing anyone. Amy from SECOR, could I impose upon you to come down and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Seems very fitting. Now I'm just going to call on people randomly. Tom Barrowby, come on down. They all know what to do and stand, but if you'll just lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Yep.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next up on our agenda is SECOR. So I'm going to actually come down, and I'm going to ask the SECOR family that's on the first row to come down and join me as we present this.
I gotta pull this up. I'm sorry.
This is a very exciting event for me tonight because you get part of our Parker safety net right here. The group that, when people get down, are in need, this is the group of smiling faces that they see. This is the energy that they see. So it's very exciting. And this presentation is actually coming at the request of Councilmember Hefta tonight. So I'm gonna read just a little bit, but then I've got some really phenomenal stats of what you people do. And I know you're gonna sit there and say, we do all that? This is exhausting. but it's really what you do for Parker. So in recognition of SECOR Cares, a nonprofit organization dedicated to serving clients in Parker, for exemplary service and significant contributions made to individuals that live in the town of Parker and the surrounding areas, your outstanding service in providing outreach to clients in our community through voluntary legal, financial, food, and meal services to enable clients to work towards self-sufficiency reflects great honor upon your organization, your volunteers, and your donors. Thank you for all your selfless sacrifice, effort, time, and dedication to operating and serving the clients in Parker. So just a little bit about those statistics I was talking about. So here are some of the 2020 statistics, and I imagine as we go into 21, they're going to be a little bit bigger. But y'all provided over 6 million pounds of food. Over 60,000 people served through your markets and your drive-thrus. Over 1.8 million meals provided through your free food market. 36,266 families were fed through your Food for Thought outreach. 175 mobile market visits to seniors and communities in need. Over 19,000 individual volunteer hours with your 868 volunteers. 4,002 group volunteer hours. Dozens work towards self-sufficiency through your Community of Hope outreach, and 1,580 holiday gifts for local children through Christmas outreach. You guys are everything. It's from cradle to grave, well, before the grave, but from every age group. So thank you. On behalf of my colleagues here on the Parker Town Council, and really on behalf of the whole town of Parker and beyond, thank you all for what you do very much. Thank you. Dennis, thank you.
Very, very true. You really said it all. And if I were going to pick out any one piece of what we do, what I would choose would be our Food for Thought program, because many people don't understand what that means. But there are 30,000+ children in the greater 3 counties that we serve that kids do not eat on the weekends. So they come back to school, they can't study, there's just all kinds of issues. I can talk for hours about this. Lisa is our director, and she could talk for even more hours, but she'll start crying. She does, and I may also. So that's just kind of the way it is. But we have the great privilege of working with Douglas County Schools as well, and with Parker Schools, and being there to make sure that not only that the children get food for the weekend, but we feed the whole family. And there's just no other organization that does that. And then we try and get them to come actually to our free market where they get food for 2 weeks. And then they come back and get it 2 weeks later for 2 more weeks. And it's about 80 to 90% of what they would need to feed their family. That allows them then to pay their utility bills, pay their rent, their mortgages, whatever it is, during this time period when they're struggling with food insecurity. We have the best job in the world. It's even better than your job. I mean, it is. Serving these people and seeing them change and seeing them move forward and become healthy and self-sufficient again is just one of the greatest gifts anyone could give, and we just love to be able to do that. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. All right, should we get a picture before we?
Yes.
All right. And Council, you want to just, we got a big group, you want to just stand up behind?
Okay, I got it.
Oh, we're standing up.
You should come join us.
Can they actually,
It's usually pretty good to.
are we better off sitting down so we're a little more eye level with them?
No, we just.
You all work together all the time, come on. I'll get in close.
We usually do this.
We're a little short-staffed up here.
We're good, yeah. We're good. Laura needs to get down there. Oh.
Maybe one more. Always take a couple. Okay, maybe like 4 more. Ready? Okay, ready. 2 pictures. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Oh, you did it.
Oops.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, pretty good.
We're good?
All right, thank you. And for those of you watching in the room, if you ever want to attend or go and have a tour of SECOR Cares, or volunteer, or donate, these are the people, and you will be amazed at what you see. So SECORcares.com, and thank you all for the tour a couple weeks ago. Very eye-opening, and very proud of what you all do for our town. Thank you again. And just want to say an extra set of thanks to Councilmember Hefta for bringing that request in, and especially that organization. Laura, you want to say anything before we move on to the DA?
It's a wonderful organization to volunteer at, to give time at, to donate, to refer people to that need help. It's right here in Parker next to Southeast Christian Church, and there's a parking lot there. I would encourage anybody that needs any, I would encourage anybody that wants to donate to the community or volunteer time there to ask if they can donate there, to do anything at all. They always need volunteers, and they're always looking for all types of volunteers. It's a wonderful organization that helps the entire community in many counties. So thank you again, Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember. All right, on to item number 2B on our special presentations. We have our new district attorney, John Kellner, with us. And, Dennis, talking about some guy that has a cool job. This is one of those, so. Great. Welcome, sir, and congratulations on your election. And you have been certainly busy since being installed as the new DA. So welcome to our council.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Is this good? Where I'm at?
Yep,
Okay.
you're good.
Well, I do appreciate getting some time.
At the bottom.
On the pole at the bottom.
How about now?
Yeah.
That working?
You're good?
We're good? All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to address you, talk to you a little bit about what's going on at the district attorney's office that's serving Parker and also the greater 18th Judicial District area. But really, before I do that, I want to brag on SECOR for a sec too, because they actually provide food and assistance to our One Place community event. And what that is something that the district attorney's office puts on for victims of crime. I mean, we're often talking about victims of domestic violence, people who've been displaced and don't have a place to go and aren't able to feed themselves or their children, and SECOR helps get that job done. We're really, really proud to partner with you on that. So I brought a handy PowerPoint, of course. No lawyer is complete without a PowerPoint. We're going to talk a little bit about district attorney, and happy to take questions at the end if you like as well.
Absolutely.
So I can get the next slide, please. And I think you can hit the button a little bit. Well, maybe not. Oh, let's go back then. Okay, so folks, you and I, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hefta, and a few other folks, we've met a few times before, but just so you all know a little bit about me and what I'm bringing to the table as a district attorney, I was sworn in January to be the DA for the 18th Judicial District after serving as a Chief Deputy District Attorney, actually running the Douglas County office here. So I have a lot of experience in this particular community. It wasn't too long ago I prosecuted a case involving a man who killed a bicyclist on our road not far from here. A great man named Chuck Vogel. You can see his ghost cycle out there down the road, and convicted the man who caused his death and sentenced him to prison. So I've been doing this for the better part of 8 years here, and before that was a district attorney in Boulder, and before that was a prosecutor in the United States Marine Corps, where I continued to serve in the reserves as a lieutenant colonel on my weekends sometimes when I get the chance. So here's what I want to show you on this slide, folks. The 18th JD, as you well know, it's Arapahoe, Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln. And I want to put a bug in your ear for the future, because many of you know that starting in November of 2024, there's going to be an election for a new district attorney for a whole new judicial district covering what's called the 23rd JD. That matters because a new judicial district has not been formed for the better part of 60, 65 years in the state of Colorado. And there has never been one that's basically split apart what we currently have, our current judicial district. So the new 23rd will be Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln counties, and that's going to have a tremendous impact, of course, on Parker and the residents of this community. We are presently really focused on the effects of COVID and getting out from a very big backlog of cases that I'm going to talk to you about that we are dealing with, and I think impacts crime and crime rates in our community. But once we move past sort of the reopening section of what's happening, this will be the main focus for us. We're going to be splitting up not just great talented prosecutors into different jurisdictions, but I mean everything down to the fax machine. Who is getting what? And yes, we do have a fax machine. So that is really what's on the table for us in the future. Next slide, please. I want to talk to you about what the 18th JD has done traditionally. So in a normal non-COVID year, so we'll go back to 2019, we file about 32,000 plus cases. About 6,000 of those, or 5,600, are felony cases. You can see that up on the slide. Those are CR. About 1,400 are JD, juvenile delinquent cases. About 7,000 misdemeanors, and the remainder, over 18,000, traffic. Now, under that rubric of traffic, we're talking about things like everything from a unsafe turn to a DUI case, so something much more serious as well. Those CR cases, felonies, those are cases where people can go to prison. Everything from first-degree murder all the way down to possession of a weapon by a previous offender, so basically a felon in possession of a firearm, which would be a Class 6 felony. You can see that dipped dramatically in 2020. We went down about 20% in our case filings. It's important to recognize that filings don't necessarily equal crime rates. Filings are what come to the DA's office from the police that are out in the streets and present to us enough information where we feel that we can actually prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. So even though filings went down 20% and some classifications of offenses went down, next slide please. Even though some classifications of offenses went down, crime rates of some of our more serious offenses went up. Right now, looking at 2021, our filings are increasing over 2020 to levels at or above 2019. So even though we took that dip in 2020, and a lot of that I think was related to COVID, less people driving on the roads, some businesses, of course, shutting down, less traffic of people to and from different areas. I think certain impacts related to the jails taking less people for offenses. There was a period of time when our sheriffs had to make decisions saying, listen, we can't bring in everybody into the jail because it's going to be too crowded and unsafe because of COVID. So there were less arrests for a lot of offenses. We were really limiting who was going into the jail to the most serious felony offenses or mandatory arrests like domestic violence. So a lot of things contributed to the COVID decrease, but we're definitely on the upswing in a bad way. So while I mentioned to you that a lot of our filings went down in 2020 on things like traffic and even misdemeanors, some more serious offenses went up. So in this area, we're talking about an assault increase of 8.5% in 2020 over 2019, 56% increase in burglary. That includes business and residential burglary, so basically breaking and entering a place with the intent to commit another crime inside, usually theft. Motor vehicle theft took a dramatic spike, 74% increase, and this is our filings. Again, these are not raw crime stats of this is the X number of additional offenses. These are the ones that we were able to prove and file. Our first quarter projections have us on a trajectory in the 18th to be much worse, frankly, than even 2020 in terms of auto thefts. Weapons charges in the 18th went up 50%. And I'm not saying, folks, that this is all Parker, of course. This is to the entire judicial district. Next slide, thank you. So here's what we're dealing with in Parker. Our cases filed, you can see up there in 2019 to 2020 as Parker PD as our lead agency. In 2020, we actually, looks like we had a decrease of offenses from a total of 994 into 790 for our total. But what you see at the bottom there is the number of cases resolved. So even though we filed less cases because the courts were largely shut down and we weren't able to get into, see judges, have motions hearings, or have trials, we actually resolved far less cases than we did in a normal year, which has left us on whole with about 6,000 plus case backlog for the entire judicial district. For Parker specifically, we're talking about 450 cases or so. Next slide, please. So right now, we have set for trial in the 18th Judicial District over 1,000 cases between now and the end of the year, because we go about 6 months out because of speedy trial. We can try in Douglas County, how many felonies, Chris? We can try 4 felonies in a month right now in Douglas County. So to give you a sense of the scope of what we're dealing with in terms of extra cases that our prosecutors are dealing with, extra cases our victim advocates are dealing with, more people, frankly, we're sending to places like SECOR and One Place. This is a tremendous impact on our community. It's caused a great stress on our staff, and it's actually why I've asked our county commissioners who create and fund our budget for some additional resources, hopefully through the American Rescue Plan, to help us staff up for the next 2 years to get out of this backlog of cases. This is Douglas County only. It's pretty shocking. As my Senior Chief Deputy, Chris Wilcox, mentioned, we can do 4 felony trials a month right now in Douglas County. We have 76 district court trials. Over those 3 months, we can do 12 of them. And these are oftentimes the most serious cases. We are, of course, prioritizing to send as many of the backed up murder cases, attempted murder cases, really dangerous felony cases, and especially sexual assaults on children and on adults into the courtroom to make sure those get resolved. I cannot tell you the impact of COVID throughout 2020 on child victims who were waiting again and again and again with a trial set that then would get continued and moved to another date. That emotional roller coaster takes its toll, so we're trying to get those to a judge and a jury as quickly as possible. The county court trials that you see up there, 96 of those. County court is misdemeanor and DUIs. We certainly have a plethora of extra DUI cases that we're carrying in the judicial district and in Douglas County, even though there were less people on the roads in 2020. Next slide, please. A couple things about what my focus is, moving into my administration. We are focusing on our core values: community-focused, open and transparent, responsive to victims, and equity and equality in the justice system. Now, when I talk about being community-focused, it's frankly doing things like this, talking to folks like you, working with people like SECOR, being open and transparent. I would invite anybody here and listening to join us for our second town hall, which we have next Tuesday. It's on Zoom from 6 to 7 p.m. Anybody can join us. We'd love to have anybody participate because we are launching the very first data transparency dashboard in the state of Colorado from a district attorney's office that will take the information that we have that's often felt like it's behind an iron curtain about what's happening with cases and make that publicly accessible. Of course, we're scrubbing out private information, so you won't have people's names out there, but you can see, hey, what's happening on robbery cases, how many of those end up in prison, how many end up on probation, and so on. Being responsive to victims is a core part of what we do. We're talking about things like our One Place program, and really ensuring that folks that get brought into the justice system on their absolute worst day, they're treated with dignity and respect along the way. Next slide, please. Focus right now, especially in places like Aurora. Many of you saw the headlines from the weekend. We had 2 murders. We had at least 5 people shot, many more shot at. And it's a concern of mine heading into the summer that we are going to see an increased amount of gun violence in our more urban areas. So that's why I've partnered with what's called RAVEN. It's a regional anti-violence enforcement network. It's a federal state task force that really focuses on trying to get guns and the illegal gun trade that is prevalent out there, and get those guns out of the hands of people who are committing these repeat shootings. Next slide, please. We're focused on expanding diversion. Right now, we've got a fantastic juvenile diversion program. About 40% of those 1,400 cases that I told you about, juvenile delinquent cases, about 40% of those young folks get taken out of the justice system entirely and put into our counseling program. We have on my staff 15 master's level therapists that actually work with these kids and their families to make sure that we're dealing with the root causes of those criminal acts and getting them out of the system entirely. That's been really successful. We have an under 7% recidivism rate for the kids that go through our program. And the average recidivism rate for most programs like this and most programs for adults is about 50%. So we're beating the average by far. So a big focus for me is expanding that same kind of program to adult diversion. Next month, we're launching a pilot program that has a diversion for folks, adults that are suffering from addiction, to get them straight into rehabilitation and counseling. I'll be happy to report back to how that goes. Next slide, please. Problem-solving courts. Many of you might have heard about this. I helped start a veterans treatment court in our jurisdiction that serves folks from this community. And it's really aimed at veterans who end up in the justice system by virtue of something that happened because of their service. Maybe they suffered from PTSD, and when they got back, things went off the rails, or their family life fell apart, or their finances fell apart, and they ended up committing a crime. We started this program as a way to divert those folks out of prison into a rehabilitation treatment-oriented program. That recidivism rate is less than 5%, so incredibly successful. We've expanded that to things like mental health treatment court, drug treatment court, and sobriety court for folks that are suffering from addiction to alcohol. A big focus for me was expanding problem-solving courts. I worked with a legislator this year, and we actually got a bill passed, hopefully it'll be signed into law soon, that expands access to problem-solving courts like the Veterans Treatment Court that we have in our community to folks in more rural areas as well. Next slide, please. That's what's going on in the DA's office. I know you all are super busy and have a lot, so I ran through it. Any questions?
Great. Let me start with Councilmember Pogue to my right.
Yeah, I know that you have the Juvenile Assessment Center, and that's worked great over the years. Are you doing some consolidated center then for adults?
No, right now we don't have what you would call the JAC, where we're taking in kids and seeing what sort of specific treatments they need. There are different programs that get towards what sort of treatment is best for adults. There's mental health screening that happens in most jails now. There's also pretrial assessments that happen that can give us some indication of that. Really what we're going off of to start, especially for this new program I'm telling you about with drug treatment, is really based off of what are their charges and what does their history look like. And I can tell you it's pretty easy to spot folks that have 2 or 3 possession charges and then they get picked up on another one while committing a petty offense. It's often driven by their addiction issues. So it's not as nuanced as the JAC, but we're definitely applying at least what we can to get people into the right spots.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dyak.
No questions, just congratulations on the election result, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Barrington.
No questions, thank you.
And Councilmember Hefta.
Yes. Thank you so much for your service, and congratulations again on getting elected. Can you expand a little bit on the jail population management tool legislation? The Colorado General Assembly had proposed Senate Bill 21062, but going forward, there is some type of bill, again, coming back through the Colorado General Assembly regarding jail population management tools. And does your office support this or not?
I can answer that one quickly. No, I do not. And if I want to expand on it, how much time do I have? What came after Senate Bill 62 was Senate Bill 273. I testified against that on multiple occasions, both at the Senate Judiciary and the House Judiciary. And I raised my concerns that bills like this, especially that first one that was called Jail Population Management Tools, that I frankly I think is a bit misleading in terms of the name for a bill title and what it was actually going to do. I testified against its successor, so to speak, 273, because it takes away discretion from police officers, and you've got a fantastic police force in Parker to make decisions about when an arrest is appropriate. And I can tell you, I think they make good decisions at the scene, because they do not arrest everybody. That has never been the way in which law enforcement has always occurred. And then it took away discretion from judges in setting certain kinds of bail conditions for people even accused of class 4, 5, and 6 felonies, which can be things like robbery, could be things like vehicular homicide, things like sexual assault on a child. And so when I heard many people saying that these bills were really just about low-level offenses, I took issue with that, because I think that's really just a small part of the story with those bills. So I do understand that they may be coming back. I'm happy to engage with anybody who wants to have discussions about how to make better policy and better legislation on the front end. But I will certainly stand up for our community if and when I see things like that I think will be harmful brought forward again.
So anything else, Laura?
Thank you.
John, I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. We've always appreciated a good relationship with the DA's office, and I know that'll continue. I've talked to the chief. He's confident that will continue, so thank you. But I just, on a personal note, I just want to say I'm so glad we have a man of faith, a family man, a veteran. You're the whole package, and I really appreciate that you've stepped up to represent the 18th and represent all of us in Parker. So thank you. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council members, for your time today.
Great, thank you. All right, item number 3 is public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for town residents and other interested individuals to speak out on items not on the agenda. This comment period is limited to 30 minutes total time, and if we go over that, we'll pick it up at the end of the regular agenda. The council will accommodate as many speakers as possible during this time, but if public comment extends, again, we'll pick it up at the end. So we have 3 ways to make public comment: by Zoom, in person, and by email to the town's clerk by 5 o'clock on the day before, or the day of the meeting. So we have received 11 public comments via the electronic means, via email by the clerk's office regarding the traffic and construction on Motzenbacher. Those will be entered into tonight's minutes and part of the permanent record. For those of you in the room tonight, we do have the wildlife ordinance on as an ordinance, and there will be a public comment period. If you would like to talk about something that's not on the agenda, up to and including relocation, which is not part of that ordinance, I welcome you to come up to the podium and state your name and your address for the record, or we'll get you in with the ordinance, but I don't want to limit your time on public comment. You can talk both, and that's fine too. So,
Created a copy of my comments.
great.
Hello, my name is Kenneth Ramsey. I live at 3862 Elm Avenue, Parker, Colorado, 80134. At the June 7, 2021 Parker Town Council meeting, I know people who were ready to attend and speak using Zoom. No one was allowed to log into Zoom early. After logging into Zoom, the Zoom link was closed. Only one person I know succeeded in getting back on that Zoom event in time to speak. Are Zoom participant records public? I suggest that Parker Zoom events login time windows be made specific, be allowed early, and be publicly posted. Phone help and email help provided during log end times on Zoom would be helpful too. On health and welfare, there was a time when soap, salt, lemon juice, vinegar, ammonia, and elbow grease were our tools for cleaning and protecting ourselves. 100 years ago, Americans began using poisons in everything. Poisons are in our homes, in our beds, in our food, in our bodies, and are in our children. Our doctors are just beginning to understand what all these poisons are doing to our health because poisons are protected secrets known only to the manufacturer. We are told poisons make our lives easier and better. But do they really? Mosquitoes are the biggest killer of humans by far, but they still thrive in spite of all of our poisons and monitoring. The Parker Municipal Code, Chapter 8.05, titled Offenses Against Public Health and Safety, addresses poisons. Are Parker property owners aware of this municipal code? Is this municipal code being enforced? Where are the enforcement records? I did a Google search. In the year 2020, 700,000 Americans died from heart disease, 600,000 from cancer, 500,000 from tobacco use, 375,000 from COVID-19, 95,000 from alcohol abuse, 45,000 from suicide, 16,650 from vehicle crashes, 555 from tuberculosis, 500 from electrical fires, 450 from measles, 350 from electrical accidents, and 41 Americans died from lightning strikes. 1/4 of the world's human population has asymptomatic tuberculosis, and that includes 13 million Americans. 30% of people with COVID-19 are asymptomatic. Where is Hansen's disease, also known as bubonic disease, on this death list? In recent decades, Hansen's disease has, on average, infected 7 Americans each year, and everyone who sought treatment survived. Unlike COVID-19, we have clear treatments for Hansen's disease. As a keystone species, prairie dogs are our most important and most mistreated wildlife species in Colorado. Why do we continue to allow prairie dogs to be killed so often in such horrific ways? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ramsey. If you have further comments, we can put those in the record if you want to send those or email those to us.
Okay, well, I'll abbreviate what I was going to say, and I'll catch up with it later.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? All right, we'll move on to reports, items, and comments from the mayor and council. We will start.
Mayor, we have a public comment from
sorry,
someone
I
on
forgot
Zoom.
Zoom. Sorry about that.
Deanna.
Great, Deanna. If you will state your name and address for the record. Hold on. Deanna, are you there? Are you there?
Yeah.
Great.
Can you?
Yep, I can hear you. And Deanna, just, I did the caveat at the beginning on if this is about the wildlife ordinance, we'll have a public comment during that time. But if it's about anything else up to and including relocation, that's appropriate for this time.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
All right.
I saw the ordinance, and I appreciate that you guys are changing the language, but I just wanted to bring up a real important point that I see, which is the situation that we're in Douglas County.
All right, go ahead and state your name and address for the record, then I'll start your time.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Because I already did that. You can hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Deanna Meyer. I'm the Executive Director of Prairie Protection Colorado, 1680 North Highway 67, Sedalia.
Great, go ahead.
I've been born and raised in Douglas County, and I appreciate that Parker has passed this prairie dog ordinance, and that you are also considering language that will give more time for relocations. But you are also the only city in Douglas County now who has passed this ordinance with the intention of helping out people and the prairie dogs and wildlife and the hawks and the eagles. So that's really great, and that you guys have set that example. And really all this stuff with the ordinance and the language and the prairie dogs that has gone on in Parker, it's not gonna help do anything unless there's land to move these prairie dogs to. So I just wanna put the voice out that, that you guys are an example. We appreciate what you've done. I appreciate that we're trying to make better language, but nothing's going to happen to save these animals, which are being rapidly destroyed, along with all of the other wildlife, which is definitely, all of the cities in Douglas County value wildlife. They've written it into their municipal codes. We have a Colorado Grassland Species Plan that encourages all of the counties and cities to take this into account. And in order to make these ordinances effective and to be able to save prairie dogs, we can change them up all we want and give as many days as we can. But the only way that they're going to be saved is if we have land to move them to, which is what we're asking, basically, the council. We've seen you do great things in passing the ordinance, and we're asking for your help to work with the city of Parker and Douglas County in general to ensure that there's some space and to move these prairie dogs to. And certainly the city council of Parker, with this example of an ordinance, has a lot more influence on our county commissioners than we do as the citizens, or at least you have a lot more power to help us really move this along and, impress upon all bodies that this can be a financially good thing for the city or the county in terms of getting developers to pay so much per acre for relocation. And it's also very important to many residents that we maintain our wildlife and our hawks and our eagles and our fox and our prairies and prairie ecosystems, which is what in turn keeps all of us breathing and living and recharging our water and everything. So I just wanted to be able to talk about that, since it's not really related to the language of the ordinance that you're checking, but really the underlying statement that we're all trying to say and that we care about is like, you've done it, you guys have passed this ordinance, the only one in Douglas County. We really need your help in setting an example for Castle Rock and the other towns in this county, so that we can actually do what the ordinance has intended to do, which is to stop the heinous poisoning, which is very painful and cruel, and to also be able to save and protect our grasslands, which are rapidly disappearing. So I thank you all for listening, and I thank you too for doing this ordinance, and I really hope that we can use your assistance and be able to make this actually work so that it benefits all parties, the city, the county, and the wildlife itself.
Great, thanks, Deanna, and I think we'll hear you back under the ordinance too. So, Danette, anyone else for Zoom?
No further comments.
All right, excellent. Now we'll go on to item number 4 for reports, items, and comments from mayor and council. And I'll start to my left with Councilmember Hefta.
Yes, again, thank you for those public comments. Appreciate that. I did attend the Colorado Municipal League training on effective governments for 6 hours via Zoom on Friday. And that was a training for newly elected officials or continuing elected officials. And it went over best governance practices. I think it was an excellent training that is provided through the Colorado Municipal League. And I would encourage my colleagues to take advantage of their wonderful training at the Colorado Municipal League. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Barrington.
I was lucky enough to attend a happy hour get-together with the Parker Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'm looking forward to attending the police officer swearing in on Wednesday.
Excellent. Councilmember Dyak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had two board meetings, one on June 10th, E470. We talked about a 38th bridge aesthetic, otherwise known as a signature bridge. There was a Regional Transportation Authority, Aerotropolis, or ARTA, who was requesting a signature bridge, something, the bridge is going to be more, again, signature to the Aurora Highlands development. So they're looking for concurrence for E470. We've never done one of these at the authority, so we gave direction to staff to enter negotiations to see if we can come to a workable agreement. We also approved 2 IT contracts. E470 is rewriting their back office software for toll collections after about 15 years. So we're getting geared up for that. I also attended a executive director E470 lunch on the 11th, and I had a Dr. Cog board meeting on June 16th. I sent the meeting as well as the previous month's minutes to council. We discussed at the 16th meeting a briefing on legislative updates. With the state legislative session ending, we had our DRCOG staff as well as our DRCOG lobbyists come and speak to us about bills that were pretty much relevant to DRCOG. We also had a briefing on potential performance measures and target amendments to MetroVision. MetroVision is the plan that DRCOG creates and updates probably every 5 years. We are required to do this to be the metropolitan planning organization so we can receive federal transportation dollars and effectively plan the region. Mr. Mayor, that is all.
That's a lot. And the Lone Ranger over here to my right, Councilmember Pogue.
And I was out of town all week, so I don't have anything.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you all.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I have one more update.
Go ahead.
I did attend the Cherry Creek Water Basin meeting this past week as well. They did give a water quality update. They will be having July meetings and tours, and they are also still providing discussion on the Regulation 72 rulemaking hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. As a reminder, the consent agenda items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion and one vote. There will be no separate discussion of anything on the consent agenda unless council votes to remove an item for individual discussion. Ordinances on the consent are for the first reading and will not be removed for separate discussion. Council, you have items 5A through 5C. There's no questions. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve consent agenda items 5A, Mr. Mayor. I apologize. Through
5C.
5C. Thank you very much.
I'll second that.
And motion was made by Councilmember Dyak and seconded by Councilmember Pogue. Please vote when prompted to do so. And the consent agenda passes 4-0. Again, Councilmember Rivera and Councilmember Hendricks are out today. Item number 6, ordinances. Number 6A, ordinance number 3-01-124 on second reading. A bill for an ordinance to amend sections 13.01.140, 13.07.060, 13.07.070, 13.07.080, 13.07.090, and 13.07.100 of the Parker Muni Code concerning extension of time. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm
members of council. As noted by the mayor before you tonight is ordinance regarding extension of approvals. In 2020, emergency orders were issued to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. The town is codifying amendments to the code to establish a formal transition from the executive orders. Current code requires that a site plan receive a grading permit or building permit within 12 months of approval and allows the planning director to approve a 90-day extension. For plats, it allows 90 days prior to approval and a 30-day extension by the planning director. The order allowed for 4 months automatic extension to all land use approvals. The proposed ordinance will allow the planning director to extend any approved land use application through December 31st. After December 31st, 2021, the code will go back to the way it's written today. Planning Commission on May 27th unanimously recommended approval. Therefore, staff and the Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve an ordinance to amend the Parker Municipal Code regarding administrative extensions of land use approvals. As always, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Great, council questions? Cheryl, any questions? John?
No, sir.
And Laura, any questions? Okay, then we will open this up for public comment at 7:46. Any member of the public present wanting to provide comment on this ordinance is welcome to walk up. Danette, do we have anyone on Zoom?
There are no public comments.
Okay. We will close public comment at 7:46, bring it back to the council for any further comments or a motion.
I move to approve ordinance number 3.01.124 on second reading.
I'll second that.
Moved by Councilmember Hefta, seconded by Councilmember Pogue. Please vote when prompted to do so.
What's that?
Are you getting a voting screen?
I am not.
All right, Councilmember Pogue?
Yes.
Councilmember Dyak?
Yes.
Councilmember Barrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Hefta?
Yes.
And that ordinance passes 4-0. Next up is item 6B, an ordinance number 3.01.125 on second reading. There is a request to continue this to date certain of July 12th, 2021.
Mr. Mayor, I move to continue ordinance number 3.01.125 to a date certain to July 12th, 2021 for second reading.
I'll second that.
And that motion was made by Councilmember Dyak, seconded by Councilmember Pogue. Chris, do you need a voice vote?
I got it.
Nope,
Mine did. Yep.
they're up. And that ordinance passes 4-0. Item number C, ordinance number 3.324.3 on second reading, a bill for an ordinance to amend section 13.09.040 of the Parker Municipal Code concerning registration of temporary signs. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. There we go. As noted on the agenda is a proposed ordinance regarding registration of temporary signs. The 2020 emergency orders were issued to respond to COVID-19. The town is codifying amendments to the code to establish a formal transition from the emergency orders to regular code. The town would like to support small businesses during this transition. The current code does not require temporary signs to be registered between October 1st and November 15th. Next slide. Sorry, next slide again. The proposed ordinance would suspend the requirement for temporary signs through September 30th, 2021. The ordinance, if approved, would sunset on September 30th, 2021. The Planning Commission, on May 27th, unanimously recommended approval. Next slide, please. Therefore, staff and the Planning Commission recommend that Town Council approve an ordinance to amend the Parker Municipal Code regarding suspending the registration of temporary signs through September 30th, 2021. Wrong year.
Excellent.
As always, I'm available for any questions you may have.
We'll start to my left. Councilmember Hefta, any questions?
No questions.
Councilmember Barrington?
No questions.
Councilmember Dyak?
No, sir.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Pogue. All right, then we will go to public comment at 7:50. Any member of the public wishing to make a comment on the sign ordinance, please come on up. Danette, do we have anybody on Zoom?
No, but as a reminder, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. No comments.
All right, we'll bring it back to the council. Any further comments or questions? Council, seeing none, we will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve ordinance number 3.324.3 on second reading.
I'll second.
Is that you, Ann? Oh. The motion was made by Councilmember Pogue, seconded by Councilmember Barrington. Please vote when prompted to do so. And that ordinance passes 4-0. Item number D, ordinance number 3.353.1 on second reading, a bill for an ordinance to amend section 13.01.140 and 13.10.250 of the Parker Municipal Code concerning prairie dog management. Mr. Fusa.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. As indicated, I'm here for a brief presentation on a limited amendment to the town's existing prairie dog management ordinance. Danette, if you would, thank you, mind reader. Without reading through this, as this mayor and council knows, there's been a substantial prior discussion of the topic of prairie dogs and the prairie dog management ordinance. The most recent discussion was at the March 29, 2021 Town Council study session. And at that session, staff discussed two limited focused amendments to the ordinance. One would be to provide an extension provision if an applicant wishes to attempt relocation and has found a relocation site, as a way of providing an incentive for relocation and also providing certainty to applicants that if they attempt relocation, their approvals and their development rights are protected and they won't expire. The second provision establishes and is an attempt to bring clarity to what I call a due diligence period in the ordinance that clarifies for applicants, staff, and the public when an applicant may undertake humane extermination if relocation is infeasible, and that is a 30-day period. The humane extermination may commence after a period of 30 days after town approval of a development application or proposal. So in the main, the two amendments you see at the bottom of the screen, number one is the provision for up to a 108-day administrative extension of an approval if an applicant has a relocation opportunity they would like to pursue for the reasons I enumerated. The second limited focused amendment is this due diligence period in which humane extermination is clarified. It may not commence until a period of 30 days after town approval of an application has run. And that has been something that has been unclear in the current ordinance and that we've had, and we think would bring clarity to that issue. Danette, if you would toggle forward. On May 27, 2021, the Planning Commission heard and considered the proposed ordinance amendment, and voted 6-0 to recommend that Town Council approve the ordinance amendment. Therefore, the Commission and staff recommend approval of Ordinance 3.353.1 for your consideration, and I'm available for comments and questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll start with questions from the council to my left. Councilmember Dyak.
Yeah, John, I think I caught it, but on amendment number one, it was up to 180 days. It wasn't just a 180-day extension, correct?
That's correct. You are correct. I was less than precise in my summary description.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Barrington.
And it's a 180-day extension if they do plan to relocate them.
So it's at the election of the applicant. An applicant may request an up to 180-day extension of their approval if they wish to or plan to relocate prairie dogs from the site. Applicant request, totally their election, administrative review and approval if so requested.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hefta.
For informational purposes, what is the percentage of applicants that actually have prairie dogs on their land? Would you say it's near 100%?
Excellent question. So I don't have exact data for you and for the council on that, but far and away less than half of all development applications that the town receives have either known prairie dog colonies on them or evidence of prairie dog colonies. So this ordinance would apply to a subset of all the development applications the town receives because a large percentage of properties subject to development proposals do not have prairie dogs on them.
A large percentage do not.
Do not.
So it's about 50%.
So less than 50% or less than half of all development applications this year, and I would say for last year, have any issue of prairie dogs on them, and in which this ordinance would be applicable. The majority do not have prairie dogs on them, and this ordinance would not be applicable to them.
And should this pass and the ordinance is applicable to them, how effective do you think this ordinance will be in encouraging those developers to engage in humane treatment of the prairie dogs and or consider relocation of the prairie dogs? Can you elaborate a little bit on your experience with that?
So the ordinance, to be frank about it, Councilmember Hefta, the ordinance already encourages relocation of prairie dogs where the ordinance is applicable to a property and a proposal, but it doesn't require that relocation. Where relocation is infeasible, as we know, it requires humane extermination, means and methods. The proposed ordinance amendment in front of you for consideration is very limited in its scope. It's very focused on those two discrete questions or issues I addressed. One is providing for an up to 180-day extension if an applicant at their own election wishes to attempt or seek relocation of prairie dogs on their property. Very limited and discrete in that regard. The second change here is simply clarifying that if relocation is infeasible, humane extermination may not commence until a period of 30 days after town approval has run or elapsed. So very limited and focused. I think the ordinance already gives much promotion to relocation, and where that's infeasible requires humane extermination. These limited focused amendments, as I've just described, will not change or alter that. I think we've gone about as far as we can in this ordinance on both ends, on both relocation and humane extermination, given the limitations inherent in the ordinance and the lack of property owners willing to accept prairie dogs in relocation on the private sector side.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pogue.
Yeah, a couple questions. When the town gives approval for a development application, what is the period of time? Because 30 days to allow extermination may not be enough. So what is the length of time that this process goes through for an approval of the development application?
Well, so Councilmember Pogue, let me attempt to answer the question, and if I'm off the mark, just redirect me, please, and let me know that. Every applicant has a different path and time frame or duration through the town's development review process. Smaller, simple development proposals can take 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 months. Because our process is referral heavy, both internal departments and external development review partners. Larger, more complicated plan development proposals can take much longer than that. So the review process varies depending on the proposal, the property, and the particulars of any proposal. What we have found since April 6, 2020, when the Prairie Dog Management Ordinance was adopted, is that most applicants and developers wish to comply and seek to comply with town requirements, including this ordinance. They want to know what they have to do and what the town expects in terms of their development. Staff, we share that information with them, including at really the informal start of our development process, which we call the pre-application meeting. And we share all kinds of information at that meeting, including the existence of the town's Prairie Dog Management Ordinance. Knowing that most developers are serious about what they do, that they want to comply with the town's requirements, including this ordinance, staff ends up having multiple conversations with applicants whose property has prairie dogs on them and is therefore subject to the Prairie Dog Management Ordinance. Most applicants, during the course or the pendency of the review of their application, are evaluating how they comply and how they can come into compliance with this ordinance. And they're evaluating the relocation opportunity, if it exists or not, and they're preparing, if relocation's infeasible, for complying with the requirement for humane extermination. Administratively, that effort on the applicant side culminates in a certification that the town has prepared and that applicants subject to this ordinance are required to complete and submit to the town, certifying their compliance with the ordinance. Most applicants, being professionals and wanting to comply, go through this whole process, evaluating relocation, understanding how they may have to undertake humane extermination if that's the approach that they end up taking, understanding what the town certification of compliance requires. They do that through the course of the process. We typically get that certification shortly after town approval of a project. And that concludes the town's review, and that tells the town. The applicant ends up identifying what they're going to do in regard to this ordinance, relocation or humane extermination. The certification binds them to that compliance and adhering to the town's ordinance, and they submit that shortly after approval, and they go forth.
The next part of that is, because at the last meeting, we heard about extermination, which was not humane, that was taking place. How do we enforce this?
So we enforce this. So if there is, let's say, notification or a complaint received by the town that an applicant subject to the ordinance is not adhering to the ordinance and as certified in this required certification, the mechanism or channel would be for somebody or a member of the public to make a complaint. The complaint comes into the town. It could come into my department. It could come into police department, community services, or animal control. It could come into another branch of the town government. It gets referred to my department. It gets referred to the police department, community services, which also handles animal control. We review it. Typically, we would make a site inspection and make a determination as to whether there's a violation of the ordinance or not and go there. The town can then take enforcement under code if a violation is found.
So what is the option? Because this process that you're telling us about is what I consider passive enforcement. What would you do? What can we do for an active enforcement of it?
So that question is beyond the scope of this ordinance. So I just want to make clear this ordinance and the ordinance amendment in front of the council does not address enforcement, to your question. It addresses an opportunity for applicants to seek an up to 100-day administrative approval if they wish to attempt relocation. And the second prong is it establishes this 30-day period from approval to when humane extermination may be initiated.
But
it doesn't
we
address
could
compliance at all.
A future discussion on active enforcement, right?
So I think that would be a future discussion. It would be outside the limits of this ordinance. But if council wishes that discussion, staff, of course, is always happy to engage in that conversation. Thank you.
Cheryl, anything else?
I'm done.
All right. Anything else over here?
No, I mean, I think, I think it's just, the talking to John previously, the 180 days or up to 180 days and 30 days are not rocket science. They're kind of just an educated guess. Correct me, John, if I'm wrong.
I would like to fancy up educated guess by calling it a judgment. Judgment,
thank you. Let's go with judgment. So, obviously we can certainly see how things go and revisit. It's an active thing, and again, there's just something out there. We want to strike the balance between development community and advocacy for wildlife. So, I think as this thing continues to move forward, we'll certainly evaluate and see if there needs to be a further discussion in the future. Thank you.
All right. We'll go ahead and open it up for public comment at 8:05. Those in the audience wishing to make public comment, please step forward. Danette, if we can cue the folks up on Zoom to raise their hand. I know Deanna will be on there. But if you'll come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. And let me see if I can.
Okay, Linda Wilson, 11443 East Regency Court, Parker 80138.
Okay.
Tonight's recommendation to amend certain areas of the Prairie Dog Ordinance is a good step forward for developers, the town, and wildlife activists. However, in my opinion, To bring the ordinance full circle and to save prairie dog lives, you need to open up more land in Parker and Douglas County, and also to add these 2 proposed amendments. The proposed 180-day administrative extension amendment that provides an applicant with certainty that protects approvals and an incentive for relocation, if feasible, is a good idea. I don't know if you're aware, but the process of prairie dog relocation takes a substantial amount of time. I would like to quote from some emails I received from Mark Snyder, who successfully relocated the Stroh Ranch prairie dogs. He explained exactly how much work is involved in relocation. He stated, and I quote, "We had to collect prairie dog traps from Boulder for an estimated 320 prairie dogs and transport the traps to Parker. Then we had to purchase all supplies needed for pre-bait. In case you're unfamiliar with pre-baiting, you place the traps near the burrows with a trap door left open at all times, place food inside so they become accustomed to going in and out of the trap for a week or 2. We laid all 320 traps on the colony, had daily upkeep of the traps by refilling oats, removing excess dirt, ensuring the traps are accessible to the prairie dogs, and so on," end quote. He and the volunteers spent 4 full weeks trapping, then digging new burrows and mowing the receiving site, transporting the prairie dogs, and finally flushing out the remaining stubborn and smart prairie dogs still at Stroh Ranch. According to Mark's emails, Ron, the developer at Stroh Ranch, who worked with Mark, stated that some developers will easily relocate wildlife if we make it possible for them to do this. But as it stands, they wouldn't be able to even if they wanted to. We have nowhere to put them. Mark's prairie dogs were lucky. Rocky Flats took his prairie dogs, but Rocky Flats gets over 100 requests a year for relocations and can take only 3 or so requests, if at all. We have to provide land for these relocations and an actual viable plan for developers so they can follow this ordinance and these 2 proposed amendments. We also need to secure the permit from CPW as they require a 30-day processing time. We need at least 4 weeks to do the actual relocation. We need to continue to update this current ordinance, so please support these new amendments, and let's keep improving on Parker's prairie dog ordinance. Thank you.
Great, perfect timing. Thank you.
Oh.
Very good. All right, next up.
Taking the long road.
And if you'll state your name and address for the record, and we'll start your 3-minute timer.
Ron Bladar, 6245 Riviera Court, Parker, Colorado.
Great. Go ahead, sir.
So at the last meeting, I spoke about how the existing prairie dog ordinance is failing to stop the destruction of prairie dogs in the town of Parker. And as you mentioned, Councilmember Poge, it was an incident that these animals were buried alive related to the development on 20 Mile Road next to the American Academy. As mentioned, I did file a police report, and we've been in communication, Mr. Fuse and I, related to this. So specifically related to this amendment, I'm not opposed to this amendment at all, because the intentions do seem good, as mentioned. But this does nothing related to the need for a downstream impact, which we don't have. And that is, as mentioned earlier, and echoing some of the comments of the folks before me, we don't have space for them. And that's the issue here. Allowing this additional time, I think, is certainly admirable again. But again, there is no places for them, as you just heard about Rocky Flats. So I do call upon all of you to essentially work with the Parker open space, what is available, to be determined. And again, emphasize also Douglas County as well. I mean, there is open space in Douglas County. We are a part of Douglas County. And for example, I was riding my bicycle on Cherry Creek Trail at Hidden Mesa, and there's a viable prairie dog colony there, but there's tons and tons of acres. So, as mentioned earlier by Deanna, we as citizens have some impact, but you folks have tremendous impact related to influencing Douglas County open space. So I'm calling upon you folks to consider these particular actions in the future as far as to find some downstream land for these animals, the very few that are existing in the town of Parker. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, next up. If you will state your name and address for the record, and we'll start your timer.
Sure. Siobhan, that's Siobhan Cox, 42943 Vista Ridge Road, Parker. I would like to thank the Community Development Department and the Town Council for continued efforts to fine-tune and improve the prairie dog ordinance. I do very much appreciate the idea of the 180-day extension of land use approvals for developers who are undertaking relocation. As you heard from Linda and Mark's, via Mark's email, it's a very extensive process that can take quite a bit of time. So I do appreciate the idea of the 180-day extension. I also appreciate the idea of a minimum due diligence period. However, I'd like to see the period be longer than the recommended 30 days after final application approval. I do realize that a developer could be working towards relocation prior to receiving his or her approval from the town. What concerns me, though, is that if a developer were impatient for whatever reason to get going and realized I do have land available to me, but I can't finish this process within 30 days after approval, that an opportunity for a successful outcome would be lost. So I would suggest possibly looking at a longer period of time for the due diligence period. I'd also like to say that on the whole, while these amendments are worthwhile and much appreciated, I have to echo what others have said, that unless the land is available for relocation, we will not be saving any prairie dogs in Parker. So please, as you do consider continued efforts to improve the ordinance, I hope that you'll also consider the suggestion that we made of a pilot project to relocate prairie dogs to some portion of Parker's available open space, and maybe to also consider, as others have said, to help us in efforts to open up Douglas County for relocations to Douglas County open space for prairie dogs from private properties. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Ramsey?
My name is Kenneth Ramsey. I live at 3862 Elm Avenue, Parker, Colorado, 80134.
Great, go ahead.
The time to begin protecting and taking care of prairie dogs is long overdue. All efforts to protect prairie dogs are welcome. While opinions vary about prairie dogs, the facts remain the same. As a keystone species, prairie dogs are the most important and most mistreated wildlife species in Colorado. Why do we continue to allow prairie dogs to be killed so often in such horrific ways? I'm reminded that the definition of evil is the absence of empathy. This problem was created a long time ago when circumstances were quite different. Things have changed. This ordinance is a step in the right direction. Any step to encourage the developers to save our wildlife is a good step. Mother Nature chooses the players, and every creature does something that no other creature can do. That's why prairie dogs are a keystone species. They allow so many others to live. And I hope that we can work with you Parker people and with the Douglas County people and to come up with some answers. We know what the problem is. There's no land available. So do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Danette, do we have comments on Zoom?
Yes, Christine, go ahead, please. Please unmute your microphone.
All right, before you start, I'm having technical difficulties up here. There we go.
Christine, please unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Christine. If you will state your name and address for the record, then I will start your 3-minute timer.
Yeah. My name is Christine Horowitz. I live in Castle Pines, 6175 Massive Peak Circle.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm originally from Germany, and there are no prairie dogs anywhere in Europe. They live only in North America, and they are limited to prairie land. The Front Range area of Colorado is prime prairie dog habitat and prime people habitat. Prairie dogs have already been on the endangered species list. Now there are less than 1% of the original numbers left. The killing of thousands of prairie dogs is actually against Douglas County's own prairie dog management policy. In Douglas County's website, under Prairie Dog Conservation, it states, Douglas County recognizes the importance of the black-tailed prairie dog and believes that the species has a right to exist on county-owned open space and parkland. The primary purpose of open space is to protect the habitat for native wildlife. Douglas County has over 15,000 acres of open space. They used to have 414 accounted acres for prairie dogs, which is now down to 90 acres. Only 90 acres out of over 15,000. Parker has significant development happening, and the prairie dogs are being killed left and right. Thank you for the concern and consideration and for the ordinance you have adopted. However, what are you doing to make sure the prairie dogs have a place to live while you approve all this development? Are you going to put them on Parker open space? I used to board my horse right next to Hidden Mesa open space, where many prairie dogs lived. We rode around the prairie dog burrows, which was no big deal for our horses. One day, Douglas County decided to have them all killed for no good reason. There's no development in that area. Open space should be haven for these animals. What about a plan to work with Douglas County commissioners to relocate prairie dogs from future development property back to Hidden Mesa? What is the provision going to be to relocate the prairie dogs while you allow all this development? Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Horowitz. Danette, anyone else?
No other comments.
Okay. All right. We will close the public hearing at 8:19 and bring it back to the council. Start to my right with Councilmember Pogue. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I think I already addressed my comments previously, so.
Okay. Councilmember Dyak.
As did I, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Barrington.
No questions.
All right. Councilmember Hefta.
No questions.
All right. Seeing none, we will entertain a motion on ordinance 3.353.1.
I move to approve ordinance number 3.3. Whoa, that's the wrong one. No, that's the right one. 3.353.1 on second reading.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion is made by Councilmember Pogue, seconded by Councilmember Barrington. Please vote when prompted to do so. And that ordinance passes 4-0. Or item number E, ordinance number 9.335 on second reading, a bill for an ordinance approving the agreement regarding design and construction of the drainage and flood control improvements for Cottonwood Meadows tributary by and between Urban Drainage and Flood Control doing business as Mile High Flood District and the town of Parker. Mr. Grabczyk, did I give you enough time to get down there?
You did.
Your titles are always long. It gives you enough time to get in.
It usually, yeah, it gives me a few minutes.
Great. Go ahead.
Is this on? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. So this ordinance is for an IGA to support funding for a project on Cottonwood Meadows tributary, specifically to begin design phase. Next. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Because they're going to have a couple more of these come before council, I thought it was kind of important to talk about our project partnership with the Mile High Flood District and kind of go over some of the benefits that the flood district provides to the town. Specifically, the Mile High Flood District provides some administrative benefits for both floodplain management and also corridor stability with master plans and master plan drainage improvements. Additionally, they provide some more physical help in terms of routine maintenance assistance. So completely funded by the flood district, they'll provide maintenance such as vegetation management, clearing or spraying weeds, cleaning up trash and debris in our drainage ways. And we coordinate these efforts and identify the places, and they'll basically perform some of those tasks for us. Additionally, they will perform maintenance projects upon request as well. Those are 100% funded by the flood district also, and those projects are kind of somewhere in between routine maintenance and performing a full capital project. And those typically involve repairs of existing infrastructure that needs repair or replacement but not redesign. And then finally, what you typically see me for are capital improvement projects. And these are several projects a year identified by the town where we attempt to, or rather, we request funding from the flood district, and they will help administer the project with us and match up to 50% per project based on available funds. And so that's kind of what what I'm coming forward tonight with you for. So I put up a quick table real quick. Councilmember Pogue asked a great question last time I was up here regarding the funding. So I just kind of wanted to show some past funding and then some future funding outlooks. As you can see, it jumps around a little bit from year to year, kind of depending on what projects we have going on and where they are in the project cycle, whether they're in design, planning, or construction. As you can see, we're kind of steadily increasing our requests. You'll see kind of a big number there for 2022. I do want to heavily caveat that is our request and not necessarily what we're getting just yet. We're looking if we don't receive the full requested funds, that we can stretch those into 2023 and still manage with the project load. Next slide. So kind of coming into the project for this IGA, Cottonwood Meadows tributary is this reach of Cottonwood Meadows tributary is a small reach right off of Cherry Creek. This reach was originally developed in the 80s prior to most of the development over in Cottonwood. It kind of came in with the first few sections of Cottonwood. The project area is bounded to the west by Jordan Road and to the east by the confluence with Cherry Creek. So this is the very downstream section of this entire reach. The entire upstream section is essentially at full build-out at this time. Everything upstream of this reach has been designed with a much more updated design philosophy. You see more drop structures, stabilization measures, and things of that nature. This being kind of one of the first channels that went in with that subdivision is more of your standard 80s trapezoidal flume. So to speak. It is a grass line channel. So that's kind of the project location and some of the history behind it. This project is, like I mentioned, in the Cottonwood neighborhood up in North Parker. This particular tract is owned by the Cottonwood Metro District, who we've been in contact with and coordinating with on our project goals and what they would like to see as well. Additionally, this corridor is also a major utility corridor for the Cotton Water and Sanitation District. So we are in contact with them because that's going to be a very important design element for this project and working around those existing utilities and not interrupting services. Next slide, please. So over here you can kind of see a picture of the project area from the upstream reach or upstream section looking downstream. Over on the left is a utility corridor that's kind of raised up a little bit higher than the surrounding lots. And then over to the right are some residential lots, or the back of some residential lots. The goals of this project are primarily to perform an updated hydrologic analysis and hydraulic analysis of the channel and make sure that the floodplain capacity hasn't been reduced over time with all the sediment loading coming into the system. Mainly, we want to make sure that the floodplain hasn't crept onto these residential lots there. Additionally, this has been a maintenance sore spot for the town. It's been very difficult to maintain due to its old design. So we would like to put in some concrete structures connecting into the culverts to help maintain removal of the sediment load so it doesn't continue to fill up the channel. Additionally, we're looking to put in a low-flow channel, formalize our connection with Cherry Creek, and look for ways to enhance the human connection with the trail that's adjacent to the drainage way. The project schedule, as we sit right now, is we're looking to go into design this year, complete our conceptual design this year, and hopefully get into begin final design here in the winter, and then move into permitting here in 2022. Finally, we're looking to get this also under construction in 2022 later in the year. For the preliminary budget for the IGA, for design and the carryover funds will continue on into the construction fund portion. The town is looking to put forward $600,000 to the Mile High Flood District's $170,000 for this particular project. Therefore, staff recommends approval of ordinance number 9.335.
Great. Council questions. Start with Council Member Barrington. Any questions or clarifications?
No questions, thank you.
Great. Council Member Hefta?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. One would be any ability to get a greater amount of funds from the Mile High Flood District. What are your thoughts on that?
So this year we are requesting more funds than last year. Typically what we've done is we spread out two or three projects over the course of maybe 4 years or so. And here we're looking at 4 projects in this particular year that's going to be spread over maybe 2 or 3 years. So it's going to be more projects spread over a shorter amount of time. So while we could maybe get more funding for this particular project, it would take away from funding from other projects. So mainly we're trying to kind of maximize the amount of contributions we get within the Douglas County pot of money every year.
And then should this not go through, I believe the homes in back would be affected, wouldn't they?
Yes, we would really like to understand better the floodplain in this area and make sure that the conveyance is being held.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pogue.
Yeah, I still don't have an answer. You alluded to it, that I'd asked about the funding options. But why are we not approaching the Cottonwood districts to participate in this?
So the Cottonwood Metro District isn't particularly funded due to its creation, as far as I understand, in the 80s. This Metro District, once again, as far as I understand, wasn't really set up to establish major projects like this. That is the primary reason.
Do they?
Michael, Tom's going to come down real fast.
So I've worked with the Cottonwood Metro District for many years on projects that we've done on property that they own. Cherry Creek has had a lot of work performed on it by the town's stormwater utility and urban drainage and flood control district, now the Mile High Flood District, over the years. And when they were formed, the Metro District was formed, their specific purpose was to only provide for the maintenance of the existing recreation facilities on their property. None of the mills and the funding that they collect through the Metro District can be used for drainage. The specific purpose is to only provide recreation. And so we've tried in the years past to get them to participate on some of these projects, but financially they're not able to, based on their charter.
Is there any option with their water? I mean, it's been kind of renamed Arapahoe Water, I think.
So the Cottonwood Water and Sanitation District, Yeah, I think they work now with, is it Aqua? Is that who they work with
I
now?
think that's their wholesale supplier.
And again, it's similar. They typically don't provide funding for drainage projects. It's only if the drainage projects would improve or protect some of the infrastructure that they have. So through our analysis, if it's demonstrated that maybe there's a water line or a sewer line that could be impacted in the future, if we don't do the project, then there would be an opportunity, I think, to request funding from the water district, water and sewer district for the project. But we probably won't know that until we actually go through the analysis and the design.
Yeah, I just find it a significant amount of money coming from Parker alone.
It is, but again, the stormwater utility was formed back in the late 90s to provide assistance to property owners. They be HOAs, metro districts, other types of property owners, and all the constituents, all of the ratepayers in the Cottonwood area, in the metro district, they also pay the stormwater utility fee to the town, which is what we use those funds for.
Thank you.
You bet. Councilmember Dyak.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, I think our staff tries to uncover as much opportunity as possible to defer our expense or our outlay. So, you know, urban drainage or mile high flood, I think they've been a good partner through the years. Some you get more than you get now, but over the course, it's again, it's money that we as the town do not have to pull out of our funds. So I'm thankful for what they've done for us. Appreciate it.
All right, with that, we will go to public comment at 8:32. Any public comment? I always go to my public comment guy here to make sure. And then, Danette, do we have anybody on Zoom?
There are no public comments.
Okay, we'll close that at 8:33. Council, any further comments or questions?
Well, I have a comment.
Okay.
So I agree it's a lot of money, but floodplain management is so important because if we don't pay for it today, we're going to pay for it down the road for sure. And I know I probably missed my opportunity to ask a question, but
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
is this going to look anything like Sulphur Gulch?
Yes, it certainly could. It will be a smaller scale type of project. I guess which areas of Sulphur Gulch are you
Where they
thinking
have
of in
the
particular?
waterfalls and I'm sure it's just completely different.
Yeah,
landscape.
it'll look a little bit different than that. We will be trying to bring in a lot of that kind of plantings and vegetation. As for the active flowing water, you won't see as much of that as you do in Sulphur Gulch, but really as the upstream system has come in line, there has been some more frequent flowing water within that reach.
I know that a lot has changed since the early 80s, so it's definitely an older design and needs to be updated. So thank you for all your work you have done on this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hefta, any questions, comments?
I'd just like to thank Michael Grabczyk and Tom, and I guess you're a water engineer, Michael?
Yes, civil engineer, but my expertise is in water, yes.
Yes, you have something in common with my husband.
Yes, so I've heard.
Thank you.
Great, Councilmember Pogue.
I'm fine,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance number 9.335 on second reading.
I'll second it.
Motion was made by Councilmember Hefta, seconded by Councilmember Pogue. Please vote when prompted to do so. And that ordinance passes 4-0. Item number 7, resolutions. We have one resolution, number 21-031, a resolution to appoint one regular member and one alternate member to fill vacancies on the Town of Parker Planning Commission. Mr. Matthews, you're back.
I'm back. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As noted before you tonight is another resolution regarding appointment to the Planning Commission. At the June 7th Town Council meeting, you will recall that you approved a resolution to appoint the chair and new members to the Planning Commission. Unfortunately, subsequent to that, Commissioner John Howe had to resign. He put in his resignation on June 8th. And his term expires on June 30th, 2023. So we did need to fill that position. Next slide, please. The interview committee that made the recommendation for the previous resolution met again on June 14th, 2021 to make recommendations to fill the newly open position. That interview committee consisted of Councilmember Dyak, Councilmember Hefta, John Fusa, the director, and myself. Next slide, please. Out of that meeting, the recommendation is to promote Anthony Matthews, no relation, from alternate to regular. He's currently an alternate. And to appoint a new alternate, Nicholas Metz, as an alternate through June 30th, 2022. Nicholas Metz's background is an entrepreneur and a recent realtor. Staff recommends that Town Council approve Resolution Number 21-031 regarding appointing a chair and members and alternates to the Parker Planning Commission. And as always, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Great, thanks, Bryce. You stuck me there for a second. I was like, a relation to who? So then it dawned on me who you're talking about. I was looking at that last name. So Councilmember Hefta, we'll start with you with any questions or comments on this.
No, just want to thank Bryce and John again for identifying these issues and bringing it to my attention and Councilmember Dyak's attention.
Great, Councilmember Dyak.
No, I again just appreciate all the public's interest. A lot of people were oversubscribed on the amount of people who want the positions that we have. Wish we could fill every position with every person who applied.
Councilmember Barrington.
No questions.
Great, Councilmember Pogue.
I don't have any questions, but thank you, Bryce.
Great, we'll open it for public comment at 8:38.
No public comments.
Great, we'll close it at 8:38 and bring it back to the council for a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 21-031.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Barrington, seconded by Councilmember Dyak. Please vote when prompted to do so. And that resolution passes 4-0. With no other business before the Parker Town Council, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make the motion to adjourn.
Great.
At 8:39.
Second.
Motion is made by Councilmember Pogue, seconded by Councilmember Dyak. Please vote when prompted to do so.
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-0, and we are adjourned at 8:39.